Imagine for a second you marry into American royalty. I mean, not just money, but real pedigree. A charming, celebrated socialite who says he's a Rockefeller. Clark Rockefeller.
And that's the unbelievable part. That name, the fancy cars, the Boston townhouses. It was all a stage, a perfectly built set for a lie that he kept up for 30 years.
Clark Rockefeller wasn't a Rockefeller.
Not at all. He was Christian Karl Gerhardt's a German immigrant who was, obsessed with making it in America. He burned through at least 7 fake identities.
And this is where it gets really dark, because the moment that 30-year con finally imploded, it didn't just expose a fraud, it ripped the lid off a 23-year-old cold case murder.
A violent crime he'd been trying to outrun with every new name he took.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to trace this man's life backward, peel back all those layers of deception.
We're starting with his final, most desperate act in 2008, kidnapping his own daughter, which is what led investigators all the way back to a brutal murder he committed in 1985. We want to figure out not just who he was, but why that murder was so essential to his evolution.
Okay, let's start at the very top then. The absolute peak of his con game. The Clark Rockefeller persona. This was the one that was supposed to last, right? The one that felt like old money.
It was so audacious.
Oh.
But it was also very strategic. That identity got him a 12-year marriage to Sandra Boss.
And she was the real deal. Harvard-educated financial lawyer, a partner at a top firm.
Exactly. The complete opposite of him. He needed her legitimacy, her stability, to make his own story believable.
The story of how they met it's just so full of this dark cinematic irony.
Oh, it's unbelievable. A cocktail party in New York, and the theme was the board game Clue. She went as Miss Scarlet. He, of course, chose Professor Plum.
The character who, in the movie version, turns out to be a murderer. You can't make this stuff up.
It really tells you everything about the level of performance he was putting on. I mean, he fed her this incredible story. He claimed he went to Harvard when he was just 14.
A physicist, wasn't he?
A physicist, an art collector, a member of some, secret group of international power brokers.
Okay, but wait. Let's pause on the most unbelievable claim. He told her he had a master key that could open every single door in Rockefeller Center.
I know.
How does a brilliant, Harvard-educated lawyer just swallow that?
Well, that's the genius of the con, isn't it? He wasn't selling facts. He was selling this sense of exclusivity. If you questioned the details, you proved you weren't part of the inner circle. By accepting something as absurd as the master key, she became part of his special world.
So the whole thing was a bubble, but bubbles burst.
And this one did. Sandra Boss got suspicious. He wouldn't file tax returns. He couldn't prove where any of his supposed wealth came from. So she hired a private investigator.
Who found nothing.
Nothing. The man Clark Rockefeller just didn't exist in any official records.
The divorce in 2007 must have been a nightmare, trying to divorce a ghost.
It was messy, but the real collapse came in July 2008. During a supervised visit with his 7-year-old daughter, Ray, he called her Snooks, he just grabbed her and went on the run.
Kidnapping his own child? I mean, that's such a brazen move. It guaranteed a massive media manhunt.
The one thing he couldn't do was his usual trick of just vanishing. He was too visible. He was caught in Baltimore using the name Chip Smith.
And that arrest was the earthquake.
That was it. They ran his fingerprints, and suddenly the lid was blown off a 30-year con. They started pulling the thread, and it led them all the way back to the mid-1980s.
So let's follow that thread. We're leaving Clark Rockefeller behind and jumping back more than 2 decades to the man who is closest to the victim. The identity was Christopher Mountbatten Chichester.
Right. Christian Gerhardt's came to the U.S. when he was 17, just obsessed with America. He moved through these aliases really quickly, trying to get residency. But the Chichester persona was his first big, performance.
And this was in San Marino, California, a very wealthy L.A. suburb.
Exactly. He reinvented himself as a full-blown British aristocrat. He was the 13th Baronet of England, he said, a descendant of royalty. And he moved into the guest house of a woman named Ruth Didi Sohus.
Didi lived in the main house with her son, John Sohus, and his wife, Linda.
And this is the crucial part. The victim and the killer were living yards from each other. John and Linda apparently found him incredibly strange. Creepy, I think, was the word one friend used. They tried to avoid him.
Then, late January or early February 1985, John and Linda just vanished.
They vanished. And the way they disappeared was instantly wrapped in this weird manufactured story. This is probably the earliest proof of premeditation.
What do you mean?
The stories they supposedly told people were all over the place. Linda told one friend they were moving to New York for John's top-secret government job.
Top secret. Okay.
Then she told her boss that both of them had top-secret jobs, something to do with satellites.
Satellites. So the story is already changing.
Completely. And then to her own mother, she said they were just going away for 2 weeks to Connecticut for a job interview for John, something with computers, and that they were going to see Cats on Broadway when they got back.
New York, Connecticut, satellites, computers, a 2-week trip, a permanent move. It's a total mess.
But they all have one thing in common: secrecy and a sudden departure. It's the same kind of lie he'd used decades later as Clark Rockefeller, creating this illusion of, a secret, important life to explain away the inconsistencies.
And the details at home proved it was a lie. Linda adored her cats. She left them at a kennel and just never came back for them.
And John was diabetic. He left all his insulin and medical supplies behind. You don't go on a top-secret mission and forget your life-saving medication.
No. So the red flags are everywhere. And right at the same time, Gerhardt's writer's behavior around the guest house gets really strange.
This is where it gets chilling. Right around the time they disappear, he borrows a chainsaw from an acquaintance at his church.
A chainsaw.
A chainsaw. And he also asked another person where he could get rid of some large drums of chemicals.
Oh, that is not good.
No. And then a neighbor complains about a foul, awful smell and black smoke pouring out of his chimney. He claims he's just burning some old carpet.
Burning carpet, right?
And then there's the rug. He tries to sell an oriental rug to a friend. The friend's wife looks at it and sees spots that she says appeared to be blood. He just rolls it up, makes an excuse, and leaves.
It sounds like a total panic.
Yeah.
A messy, violent event followed by a frantic, amateur cleanup.
And the police did get involved briefly. An officer went to the guest house to ask about the missing couple. Gerhardt's writer, as Chichester, answered the door completely naked,
What?
claimed he was a nudist, and then just refused to cooperate. Soon after that, he vanished. The Chichester identity was gone.
And the case just went cold for 9 years.
9 years. The only clue was their truck, which surfaced in Connecticut. Gerhardt's writer, now calling himself Christopher Crowe, a TV producer, had just given it to a friend. Then, in 1994, new owners of the property decide to put in a swimming pool.
And they start digging.
They start digging, and they find dismembered human remains cut into 3 pieces buried a few feet down right near the guest house.
In the exact spot he'd once claimed was being dug up for plumbing problems.
The exact spot. The forensic work was horrific. The remains belonged to John Sohus. He'd been killed by severe blunt force trauma, at least 3 huge strikes to his head, and he had multiple stab wounds. It was a brutal personal attack.
But finding the body is one thing. Tying it to a man who'd been gone for a decade with a different name. How did they do it?
The physical evidence they found with the body was incredibly specific. The remains were wrapped in these very distinct plastic bags.
What kind of bags?
One was from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee bookstore, and the other was from the USC bookstore, Trojan Stores. And investigators figured out that the specific design of those bags were only sold during the exact years Gerhardt's writer was a student at those schools.
Wow. That's almost impossible to explain away. He literally wrapped the body in his own past.
It's his own history catching up to him. On top of that, they used luminol on the guest house floor and found huge bloodstains with white marks. A clear sign someone had tried desperately to clean up a bloody scene.
So the prosecution's theory was he murdered John, used the secret mission story to buy himself time, buried the body in the backyard, and then just disappeared into his next identity.
Exactly. But the trial didn't happen until 2013, 28 years after the murder. And the defense had one huge piece of ammunition.
Linda Sohus. Her body was never found.
Never found. And that was the core of their argument. They said Linda, who was reportedly a tall, strong woman, killed her husband and then did exactly what Gerhardt's writer did. She vanished into a new life.
If the con man could disappear, why couldn't the wife? It's a powerful piece of reasonable doubt.
It is. The defense even pointed to some postcards sent from France after the disappearance, supposedly from Linda. Gerhardt's writer himself suggested she change her name to Belinda Schuss, a horse trainer.
But that was a dead end.
Completely. Investigators checked over 30 billion records. There was no trace of Linda Sohus anywhere after February 1985. And the postcards, DNA on the stamps, came back to an unidentified male. Not him, not John. The prosecution argued he just had an accomplice mail them.
So despite all that, despite the missing body, the jury convicted him of first-degree murder.
They did. They were convinced by the chain of evidence. The book bags, the burial site, The whole elaborate deception, it was just too specific.
And what about him, his reaction after the conviction?
Pure arrogance. He claimed half the jurors were too stupid to understand a reasonable doubt. He refused to talk about his past, saying it would jeopardize his appeal. He lived entirely inside the performance.
He really saw his whole life as a work of fiction, didn't he? I read he claimed his life was modeled after a novel he read as a kid, maybe The Great Gatsby.
He was the architect of his own mythology, that blue-blooded accent people talked about. Some think he modeled it, maybe unconsciously, on Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island.
That is bizarre.
The novelist Walter Kern, who knew him, described him as brilliant, diabolical, and a monster. He said his evil came from a complete lack of feeling, using everybody as a tool.
So he spends 30 years building these more and more sophisticated identities, graduating from a fake baron to a Rockefeller, all to cover up one messy, violent crime he committed in his 20s.
And the ultimate tragedy is the sheer effort of it all. The whole theatrical lie was only broken by the one thing he couldn't fake: his love for his daughter. Kidnapping her was the desperate act that finally forced the world to look past the mask.
It makes you wonder, was the murder of John Sohus necessary for him to evolve? Did he need to shed that Christopher Chichester identity so completely that he had to, erase everyone associated with it to become the next person?
And that leads to a really fascinating question. We always think the perfect crime needs this brilliant, meticulous plan. But maybe the only thing more effective than a perfect plan is a perfect decades-long distraction. If he had never kidnapped his daughter, would the German kid from Bergen, who became Clark Rockefeller, have ever been exposed as the killer of John Sohus?